the funding portion, but 3 major parts that have to do with how we would spend the money, because we felt if we didn't explain to people how we would spend their money, why would they be willing to give us that money? Our early childhood people said, we need about $300 million to finish up doing what we should have been doing. Those kids with high disabilities, we're getting, some of them with the most needs, we're getting 10% of the time that was recommended that they get. And we know that the money spent on those kids pays the biggest return dividends, because if they come ready to learn, they can. So that came out to about $300 million. We ended up with that being $400 million, because we said they should get 20% of the funding from this bill for early childhood, at least 20%. We then said those schools that are asking for that ability to use the money the way they want, increased smaller class sizes, increased days, more vocational programs at the middle school and lower, reading programs. We said, okay, 50% or more of the money that we bring in is going to go directly to schools in a new formula that gives twice as much of the formula for poverty. So we get 0.5 in the current formula. It now has 0.5 for the formula, because the one thing that was consistent across the state was that poverty makes a difference. So we took that information and we put together and said, okay, we're going to give you the money, but we have to have some parameters about it. You need to do certain things. You need to have a plan on how you're going to spend it. Just like Measure 98, you need to have a plan. And that plan has to tell us how you're going to spend your money, and how, when you spend that money, it's going to make a difference in the following things. High school graduation, one of those things which we have not done well in. On track to graduate at 9th grade. In other words, have you earned 6 credits by the end of your 9th grade? Why aren't we keeping track of that? How do we make sure that kids are making progress before that graduation? 3rd grade reading. Most of us in education know that if you are not reading by 3rd grade, it is difficult to keep up with other people, other students, because from 3rd grade on, much of the learning is done by reading. And finally, it's difficult to learn if you're not there. So chronic attendance rates need to come down. So those were the basic ingredients for that fund. And to ensure that they did it, we did some accountability. 1, every year, school districts are already held accountable for how they spend their money by audits, physical audits. We are requiring that their physical audit include line items that have to do with the money they're getting from the Student Success Committee, Student Success Fund, so that we can follow that they are actually doing it. Number 2, we decided that we needed to make sure that there were experts, past superintendents that have been successful, past teachers that have been successful, others in the industry, that we would make teams that could go out and support these school districts that weren't making progress on the plans that they had had. And for those most affected schools, those schools that have been underperforming the greatest, we wanted to make some actually expert teams that would go out and work with them, and they get a little bit extra money for that. And we gave that to the Department of Education to make sure we did that. So first we had 20% going to early childhood, 50% going to the school districts. That leaves 30% or less to go to the statewide programs. And the things that came across to us were everybody out there wanted to fully fund Measure 98. So it is embedded in this bill in the statewide. We also wanted to feed kids, because kids that come hungry don't do well. So there's a fairly large amount of money set aside to make sure that all kids, up to 300% of poverty, are going to have free meals when they come to school. We added that a program for re-engaging students who had dropped out of school, factored after the Washington model, would be available. And we thought that Title I schools, to make sure that kids didn't lose so much education over the summer, could have summer programs. So all of that came from conversations with the members in the committee and community members throughout the state. So then it came down to funding. And we had a revenue committee that was ready to have a conversation. They had been working on this similar conversation for 3 years, so it wasn't a new conversation. And they, in their 10 meetings, invited conversations with business from around the state to make sure that as many people as wanted to get engaged got engaged in having a conversation about how we were going to go about doing that. They came up with a plan. Not everybody agreed with that plan. But in that plan, they did two things that we said were essential. In that very first guiding document, it said we need stable funding. Well, the most stable funding that you can ever have in an education system is property tax. The most unstable is income tax, because it fluctuates so much. So they came up with a plan that allows us to tax at a very low rate. Corporations, C Corps, all the corporations that we have, there are about 260,000 of them, at a very low rate, 0.57. Actually, the original bill was a much lower rate, but in talking with some of our business partners, they asked that we include a 35% deduction so that we could count against our money that we earned, wages and or costs of doing the business. They also felt that we needed strongly to protect small business. So what they did was say that the first $1 million there is no tax. And the total number of corporations that we had that were going to pay the tax went from 260,000 to 40,000. And then if you think about the 350,000 that they can deduct, it means that those companies that sell over $1 million in our state could in fact sell $1,350,000. And those people between $1 million and $1,350,000 will pay a minimum tax of $250. So it was important to try to make sure that our small businesses continue to thrive. And with those changes and others, we got a fairly large portion of our business community to say, we're either neutral or we support the bill. All wrapped together, if you go back to that first list of 5 different requests that were made to us, I believe that we have met the requirements of meeting all of them. And I guess I will end by saying the following. We started a journey 16 months ago, which I did not know the outcome, or nor did any of the other 14 people. But we entered into it with an understanding that we would talk to people, we would listen, and we would change as we got new information. In the last hearing we had a ecumenical minister person come up and say, you know, I read the whole bill and I don't see anything about homeless. And we knew we had made a mistake. Homelessness is a very big indicator of success. And so what happened? We put it into the bill. We listened to people every time we had a hearing. We listened to our colleagues that came and worked with us. And at the end of the day, we have a bill that I hope at the end of today is on its way to the governor's office. Because we have started a journey 16 months ago, and today is the culmination of that journey. I implore each and every one of you to vote aye on 3427A. Thank you.
Senator Burdick, Senator Fagan.